Hello and welcome to Volleyball State, a look at the sport of volleyball in 6 rotations and a proud part of the I-80 Club. I'm Jeff Sheldon.
And I'm Lincoln Arneal.
Okay, this week we talk with Erik Sullivan, the new head coach of the U.S. women's national team. Plus, we've got some Husker happenings, even though it's the offseason. John Cook stopping by and dropping all sorts of nuggets in a recent interview, giving us some things to chew on. I should be clear, interview not with us, with friend of the show, Brent Wagner, but he said some really interesting things that we want to chat about. And we also say, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, my Italian is rusty, benvenuta to the newest member of the Nebraska volleyball team. But first, Lincoln, tell the folks all of the different ways they can plug into the Volleyball State community, become part of the I-80 Club, and just lean into this show.
Yes, we are putting out all sorts of content, all sorts of platforms as well, too. The best way to support this program, though, is signing up to become a member of the I-80 Club. You can do that on patreon.com/I-80 Club. We send out newsletters. We do bonus podcasts. We've done a couple of the last few weeks about a post-match, giving our instant reaction to the Nebraska spring scrimmages on there. So, and also you get to join the Discord. It's kind of a cool membership platform there, the community that we've grown, people that are really interested and like to talk volleyball as well there. So cool community there. And also you can follow us on different social media. You can follow Volleyball Pod is on Twitter, Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram. I tweet out all the news stories on Twitter and Blue Sky as well, too. I write for Huskers Illustrated, occasionally put out a Substack here and there. So we put out lots of content. You don't just have to get it through your ear holes. You can read about it and follow along and be part of our community.
Absolutely. One of the things that I was thinking about the other day, I've never engaged in a Discord or used it before we became parts of the I-80 Club. And I found that really fun. Like, we took a lot of questions from some recent shows from the Discord. There is a community that we see out there that's wanting to learn more about volleyball. And so I think Lincoln and I are trying to set up something maybe for June, a subscriber only bonus show that can bring on someone maybe a little bit more knowledgeable than ourselves to talk about the ins and outs of some volleyball X's and O's, or why maybe Nebraska does some things the way they do it. So just a little tease there. We've got something that we're working on, and gosh, it seems like the actual season itself is coming faster and faster every day. Yeah.
And I was just trying to look at my calendar. The Big Ten Media Days are probably about 2 months from now. So it's the volleyball calendar never lets up too. And plus we got signing day or communication day is probably a better way to put it, coming up in less than a month. So
and we're going to talk about this on the show today, but one of the most recent things that Lincoln's written, and maybe it'll be up online by the time this show drops, is a conversation with the most recent Husker. So we're going to talk a little bit about her in a little bit. Any place you want to plug that in particular? Where's it going to be? Where can people?
It's going to be Huskers Illustrated. It's getting edited as we speak right now, so it will be up by the time you're listening to this. Go to huskersillustrated.com. You can read about that, or go to my social media. I will definitely put it out that way. So that'll be our rotation 3. We'll talk about Virginia Adriano. So we're going to start in rotation 1. We're going to talk to Erik Sullivan, the head coach of the United States women's national team. Then we'll do a little reaction to that interview in rotation 2. Like I said, rotation 3 will be all about Virginia Adriano. Then rotation 4, we are going to talk about Brent Wagner's interview with John Cook, kind of some reaction to that. Whenever John Cook talks, news is made. It seems like he's very newsworthy quote.
Well, and now that he's retired, like he doesn't care anymore. He doesn't have any need to keep anything secret. So it's like, wait, what? Why didn't you tell me that 8 years ago?
Yeah. It's all the unfiltered John Cook. It's great. Then rotation 5, we're going to talk about some updates coming home to Nebraska's arena, their home arena, some changes inside it. Fans, I got some pushback on social media about some of the changes, but we'll talk about that. And then rotation 6, just some odds and ends. We'll finish out some other little news stories that are floating out in the volleyball world. So that's what we got coming up on the program today. So thanks for listening. We are going to start right now. I'm going to throw it to ourselves in the past. We recorded this interview last week, but it is our interview with Erik Sullivan. So I will toss it to Jeff.
Well, hey, welcome to Volleyball State, the newly named U.S. Women's National Team coach, Erik Sullivan. Erik, we know you've got a busy summer coming up. You got training camp going on right now. The Volleyball Nations League starts in June. We really appreciate the time you're taking to join us on Volleyball State.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You know, I still think of you as like the brand newly named women's national team coach, except you were hired back in January. So give us a little taste of what these last 5 months have been like as you get ready for what's a really busy summer for this program.
Yeah, it's been really cool. Obviously, very busy from the first day. I think day 2 after the announcement, I came out to California and met with Karch. Just kind of trying to wrap my head around of the path that I needed to take to get to where we are now. And he was so great and gracious with his time and information. And obviously he's been doing this for a long time, but he's been phenomenal in that transition. I don't think I could have done it without that. But yeah, from day one was hiring staff and talking to players and trying to put a roster together and staff in place and get this thing rolling. There's a lot of nuts and bolts behind actually, showing up in Brazil and playing a match.
Yeah. You mentioned, you've traveled around a lot. You've watched a lot of volleyball. I mean, a lot of professional volleyball to watch in the United States now too. And you've talked with Karch. I mean, what have you learned about the job over the past 4 months?
There's so much more to it than just what you see with the senior national team. With women's volleyball, you're just managing. There's more events. There's, the roster's bigger and deeper than maybe I was accustomed or what I saw when I was working with the men's team for the last 3 quads. And obviously I wasn't in the day-to-day in the office with that, but just, I think with where women's volleyball is in the U.S. and the depth that we have, there's just a lot more to it than maybe I initially knew. Mm-hmm. I knew it was going to be a bigger deal, and obviously that was the case. But, you kind of think like, managing 20, 24 athletes, and then in the reality, you're probably looking at more like 50 or 60 athletes, and then trying to weed through the depth of all of that is really interesting.
Well, you mentioned being able to kind of download some of the experiences of Karch, who you have a relationship with. Also, a relationship with John Speraw, the CEO of USA Volleyball, being an assistant on the men's side under him and playing for him. How important have those relationships been to you in, kind of not starting from zero and being able to hit the ground running?
Yeah, it's been great resources for me. We're all in the same building, so it's an easy, walk down and chat at times. Obviously, we're all doing a bunch of stuff, and everyone's hair is on fire a little bit here. But again, I just, they've been phenomenal and super cool to be able to tap into those guys. When you look at it in the reality of things, for the last 12 years plus, there's just been this stability. And even before that, Karch was an assistant under Hugh, and John was an assistant also under Hugh. And yeah, so I think I'm probably the biggest change that's occurred here in probably roughly 20 years, just with having a little bit of difference.
What kind of strength or advantage do you guys view that kind of stability, where there's sort of an infrastructure in place and the relationships there and the communication, in theory happens pretty easily? Because they could have gone about it another way. They could have brought in someone to lead this program that is not, have those relationships built in. How are you leveraging that and making sure that it's a strength for this program?
Yeah, the relationships, it's great. It's obviously helpful to sit down with somebody that you've known for a long time and not have to get through some of those barriers of meeting and getting comfortable. But I think, whoever they had hired, those guys would have been a resource for that individual. I just think they're great people and that they want what's best for USA Volleyball. I think in this job, there's some institutional knowledge of the international, environment and how things are done and handled. The Olympics is its own beast because there's just not that many multi-sport international games like that anymore. VNL is obviously just volleyball, and you're traveling around. It's more of a single event or, a multi-event kind of in a week-long process. But I think just understanding kind of the flow of that, traveling and being a part of those groups and understanding, the nature of international travel and competition and the pitfalls that come with that, are so different than being in the college space. You're dealing obviously with different governments and cultures and just everything, environments. I remember one of the extremes, and obviously I played professionally, and we ran into some stuff where you get into some Eastern Bloc countries or some different countries that maybe don't have the economic situation of first world countries. Travel. We played a match in Brazil for what was then called World League, and it was in the summer, their winter, and there wasn't a window in the building. They had all been broken out, and I think it was about 35 degrees.
Whoa.
Yeah, and so we're in there. You're trying to warm up for practice with gloves on and beanies, and everyone's breathing smoke out their mouths because it's so cold. And yeah, we had to go play a match 8 o'clock in the morning, and show up and there's 10,000 people and they're not too bummed out about it being 35 degrees and getting after it. And, those kind of experiences and being able to, part of being great internationally is being able to kind of roll with those punches and not have that just smash you down before you ever even get on the court. It just kind of is what it is. And we'll go with the tide and do the best that you can do.
Training in LA doesn't sound too bad compared to those conditions at all. No,
not at all.
Hey. One of the things we've kind of talked about, John Spara, Karch Karai, yourself, all UCLA grads too. Recently the men's volleyball title happened. UCLA fell to Long Beach State in the title match. How sad was it to come into work the next morning? At least you have a group therapy session to talk through your feelings and disappointment.
Man, it's obviously you're rooting for who you're rooting for, and it doesn't always go your way. That's one of the things I quickly learned. As an athlete that played at UCLA, I think at the time when I went there, they basically told you if you played for 4 years, you were more or less guaranteed 2 titles. There was no class that had gone through there by my freshman year that hadn't won 2 national titles. Those times have changed, obviously, but yeah, for sure, we're rooting for him. Brandon, this was his first real official day, so he's rolling right off of that. But we also got Taiba in our gym, and she's pretty stoked. So I don't know. Even Steven is bouncing out a little bit.
There you go.
Yeah.
How long was this job an aspiration for you, or was it something you'd aspired to be the head women's coach? And then kind of the second part of that, after 14 years at Texas, was it difficult to let go of kind of the comfort and familiarity you had built there with the Longhorns?
Yeah, those are good questions. Part of me, I've been around USA Volleyball most of my life, I would imagine, when you start thinking about years. I think my first experiences were 16, 17 doing, what used to be called high performance, now NTDP. I was part of some of those junior programming things going on in high school, through college, doing collegiate stuff or B team stuff. And then obviously a year or 2 out of college, getting with the national team. And then post national team, I sat on boards for USA Volleyball for probably 10 to 12 years. Got involved, obviously, in the Rio Quad with John and was a part of the men's program here for the last 12. It's been a part of my life. And so there's always been a part of me that has thought somewhere in my career I would get back to it. To be honest with you, I didn't know if that would be on the men's side, the women's side, if it was a head coach or an assistant coach. The international piece is very appealing to me. I like to travel. I like to be places where I've never been. I like to experience different cultures. I think the international competition is very intriguing. So there was part of me that was like, all right, at some point, my kids get old enough and, the travel isn't as much of a burden on our family that I would look at it. And so when this opportunity came up, it was just the right time. My kids are adults now. My son's wrapping up his senior year in high school, but I get to stay local for college in Austin. My daughter's at home and doing great. And it just kind of was this, hey, I can be away for some long periods of time here and not be very disruptive for my family. So, that piece of it, the idea of getting back into it, like I said, has always been intriguing for me. It just everything about it, I don't know. I've had some opportunities in my college career to move and change jobs. Everything about this job was like there was no negative that I could talk myself into of like, oh man, this just isn't the right time or the right thing to be doing. It was just seemed like everything kind of lined up.
Mm-hmm.
As far as leaving Texas, yeah, it was tough. Great place to work, great community, great boss, great athletes. The athletic department supported us. Fun place to go to work every day. I feel like I'm super fortunate in the fact that obviously it's a job and you work hard and you put in a lot of hours, but it just never really felt like I grew up and have a real job. So, hard to leave. The people part of things, I think, becomes more and more important the longer you are in this. At least it has for me. I realized after we won the first title with Texas that it doesn't cure all ills. That, you think that you're fighting for this thing and scratching and clawing for it, and you finally get it, and you think that your life is going to be different on Monday, and it's not. You have a big shiny ring that you can put on your hand and a trophy that sits in the corner, and then life goes on and you're starting from scratch. So honestly, winning the second and third were more enjoyable experiences for me because I kind of knew what was on the other side of that. And it was, for me, that wasn't a new experience. So I got to kind of sit back and enjoy it with the people that it was a new experience for. Like, so cool to see the athletes achieve that and staff that hadn't won it. So to me, that was the important piece. And obviously leaving, when you have those relationships with the athletes and leaving them and, some feeling that you're abandoning them, I guess, maybe on a personal level, but they all understood. They were great about it.
Well, I imagine that you've had plenty of other opportunities kind of come your way that you looked at during your career at Texas. Did Jarrett have any advice or guidance for you about this particular opportunity?
He has been, first of all, such a great guy and a great friend. He has been nothing but supportive in all of that. Anytime a job opened up, he would ask me if I was interested and wanted help pursuing it. I was always very open and clear. I talked to, a few ADs here and there about some opportunities. A few jobs, maybe I was a little more interested than not, or at least we were having some conversations, and he was always great. He gets it. He understands what it is. When this popped up, and it kind of popped up in a different way. It wasn't just like hey, this job's open and I'm going. It took a little time to get to that point. And when it did kind of open up and, hey, I'm going to pursue this, he was like, yeah, hey, how can I help you? What do you need? What do you want? He gets it. He's awesome.
Yeah. You mentioned that. I mean, the national team has been part of your life for more than half of it at this point. I mean, did your experience at the Olympics as a player kind of impact your desire to take the job?
It's a great question, to be honest with you. When I played my last match competitively, it was a bronze medal match in Athens. I knew I was going into the college space. Colorado had hired me by that point. To be honest with you, I'd never really thought that I would have an opportunity to go back. Mm-hmm. That it again crossed my mind of maybe being involved in something or another, and I was involved coaching some high performance stuff. But when John reached out to me early in the Rio quad and just asked if I wanted to come on some trips, it was like no brainer. How do I make this work? Those tended to be my vacations, what I thought as my vacations. I would find somewhere that they were going in the world that I, hadn't been or found interesting. And I would fly in and hang out with them for 10 days and go, help them compete in 4 matches. And it was this killer experience. So, we got 2 years into that, and he asked me if I wanted to be the team leader for the Rio team. And it was like, man, it blew my mind a little bit of, hey, I get to go do this. Blew my mind and freaked me out a little bit because that's not a small job. No. And it's interesting. People ask like, oh, what are you doing? It's a boondoggle. You're just hanging out. And it's like, man, I don't know. Paris, I'm up at 8. Well, up at 7, waiting for everyone to get up at 8, and you're just grinding through the day, trying to make sure that the athletes are doing athletes things and the coaches are doing coaches things, and you're putting out little fires as they pop up and organizing everyone's day. And, trying to help out and coach and do all those things that you can do on the side. But such a cool, the experience of that. Everyone asks, like, what is that? And it's like, there's no way to describe it. You wake up and walk around the village and you see, the world's best marathoner taking some warm-up laps around the village at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's like, where am I?
Yeah.
You see all of it, and it's such a cool and unique experience, and to be able to have been part of 5 of them, all very unique in their own ways. And I just couldn't be more blessed and more fortunate. And now obviously the chance to be a part of a 6th one and in this role is a little bit mind blowing.
Yeah. I mean, for our listeners who are not as familiar with your background, notably, this is your first head coaching position with what I'll call like a senior team program, whether it's a head college coaching position, a job like this with the national team. Did you have any reservations about kind of your first head coaching job being at such a prominent level? There was no, training wheels or baby steps before it's like, boom, USA coach.
Look, human nature would tell you that if I told you no, that I'd be lying. I mean, I'm confident in. I don't want to sound arrogant here, but I'm confident in my experiences and what I've been around to put me there. But yeah, for sure, you start second guessing all that stuff of, I don't have that experience. I haven't been around it. I know that's not a blind spot for me, but a weakness for me. And I'm doing some things, I think, hopefully to rectify some of that stuff. One of the reasons that I'm coaching for love this season is that it buys me the opportunity to go coach for 4 more months that I wouldn't have otherwise. And the reality of things, we get into our summer, we're probably looking at playing 20 to 22 matches if we do some things and go far enough into some tournaments, but it's not, 60 or 70. And so when that opportunity popped up, that was the first thing that crossed my mind was, hey, I get to go coach more matches here. I get to go train a team and tinker with things and figure out how to get, maybe my systems in place a little better, or design drills that I find, fun and interesting that help, kind of evolve and clean up systems for us. So that part of it was, that experience piece. I'm going to coach the NORCECA Final 6 team, which is a senior level event for us at the end of the summer, which, the senior staff normally does not coach. But again, another opportunity for me to coach, be on a trip with some younger athletes and get, to coach another 6 or 7 matches like that. That I think is what I would like, what I need in these experiences. So, everyone second guesses all that stuff a little bit. But to be honest with you, it's been nothing but super cool and fun and exciting. And, day 1 of practice. So like, all right, let's go. And the group we have in the gym is totally on board. We're messing around with some stuff and they're in and bought in and working their butts off to try to make it all work and function. So it's been a great experience so far.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it's a direct correlation, but like to me, coaching the national team is different than coaching a club coach or coaching a college, because you only get them for a month or a few weeks before you go off and play a tournament. I'm maybe more familiar with in like the soccer world too, where it's a very different. Have you talked to other national team coaches in different sports to kind of get a hold of that or try to figure out, or is it just kind of relying to the infrastructure within USA Volleyball?
Yeah, mostly the infrastructure in USA Volleyball. I think each sport's so unique and different, but yet you're 100% right, Lincoln. It, we are fortunate that we got the numbers that we got in early enough in this little block to get probably 4 solid weeks of training in to implement some system stuff. Our first match is June 4th, and our potentially last match, the medal rounds for World Championships is September 7th. And I don't know if you count the days in there. If we do make World League finals, we're on the road for 10, 20, 30, 40, 60 of those days.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you're coming back and it's like, all right, hey, we have a week, but we were just in a foreign country for 10 days. We're going to take a couple of days off. Everyone's going to be jet lagged. How do we get the most we can get out of 4 or 5 days before we get back on a plane and travel again? So even on some of those blocks where it's like, hey, we do have some practice days in here, it's not, super high level functioning. Hey, we got 20 days in a row to go clean some stuff up. It's for sure a different way of thinking about things.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the schedule, because I don't know if everyone realizes just how full this summer is for USA Volleyball. You've got the Volleyball Nations League, you mentioned the World Championships take you to Asia, maybe a month later. And this is also the beginning of an Olympic cycle. And so I'm always interested to know, do you approach this that it's like the beginning steps of a 4-year process? Or are you trying to win every tournament? Or how exactly do you approach this from a priority standpoint, knowing that really it seems like the ultimate way national teams are evaluated is how they perform at the Olympics?
Yeah, 100%. All of it. I think you look at it as a day-to-day of what are we doing, what's important. But you're putting all those things framed around a 4-year cycle. So another one of the super appealing things of being a part of this quad was that we are obviously hosting. I think to compete in your home country is going to be totally unique and different than any of the other 5 experiences I've had, some good and some bad. But we don't have to qualify. So if you just look at the last quad, people forget pretty quickly, but that Olympics, the Tokyo Olympics, got pushed a year. Mm-hmm. So the quad was actually 3 years, and they had to go qualify for Paris 2 years out or a year out. So in year 2, they're already looking at qualifying. What people don't understand is the qualification piece may be the most stressful tournament that you play in your 4 years. Because if you don't qualify, that is a gigantic failure. Mm-hmm. And I don't think people understand. The 2 that I had to qualify was actually really interesting. If you look back at the history of men's volleyball, the men didn't have to qualify for 20, 24 years. We hosted in 84, won the gold medal. At that time, if you won the gold medal, you automatically qualified for the next. Won in 88 in Seoul. That qualified us for 92. 96, we hosted Atlanta. So, and didn't go to 80. So the last Olympics they had to qualify was for 76. And then in 2000, we had to qualify again. And we had to go to Canada. Canada had a nice team. They absolutely smashed us in pool play 3-0. And we're like having their celebration party all set up, the whole thing. And we came in and played a really nice match in the finals and beat them down to get there. But not this easy, like, oh, it's warm and fuzzy. We're just going to go play some warm-up matches and roll in. Going into Athens in 2004, we beat Cuba and Puerto Rico 15-13 in the 5th. I can still see the play in my mind. It was Reed Priddy and Tom Hoff stuffing their opposite, I believe, at 15-13. And there was not a single U.S. fan in that gym. They were rooting for Cuba. But again, one of those things where, we're a point away from going down some crazy path where there's maybe 3 spots available and you don't want to be in there because you're fighting with the rest of the available teams in the world. But those were maybe 2 of the biggest tournaments that I played in as far as like scope and stress and the timing of all that stuff. They're happening in the winter. So guys are coming back from their pro teams back then. Guys are flying in, we're training for a week and then going and trying to qualify for the Olympics. It's so not having to do that, long story short, not having to do that, I think gives us this bigger ramp to kind of look at the quad a little differently. Look, we're going to go try to win every match we play, but the scope of kind of how we're building rosters and what we're looking at may be a little bit more variable in the bigger picture.
Yeah. And there was a released earlier this month, 30 players were invited to the training camp. How do you plan to use that player pool? Do you plan to you could use this, try to get the best unit each different week you're going to VNL, or mix and match the roster just to get to know the best combination? What's your plan to kind of use that depth at this point?
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's a little bit of everything. Like I said, we want to go win every match, but we're going to also take some time to look at some players, especially some younger players. I think we'll have some opportunities that they might normally not have. When you're in that 3-year cycle and you're looking at, man, we got to be rolling next year, I would have looked at this totally differently. But I feel like there's a little bit of time to maybe look at some youth here in some different positions. But it's not just going to be hey, it's just your shot this week. Everyone gets to take a swing at this. You got to come in and compete in the gym and show that you can play at a high level for a long period of time. And, but there will be some variability in the rosters, I would imagine.
You said you want a lot of athlete feedback in this process as you get going. What have you heard so far from the 3 or so weeks that you've been in camp? What do the athletes in the gym kind of want out of this experience this summer?
Yeah, again, there's some youth, not necessarily youth in age, but youth in experience in here. And, I think this is a really hard gym to compete in.
Mm-hmm.
There's all these high-level athletes that'll tell you, like, hey, this is my goal and my dream. And then they'll get here and tell you, man, like, this is hard. I'm used to being kind of the big fish in a small pond, and now you're the big fish in a big pond because everyone's the big fish. And so I think, having that perspective is hard for a lot of players. You get in this interesting dynamic of you're competing with each other for roster spots. But at the end of the day, we're a team. We're trying to win matches together. And so, creating and fostering an environment where that, we can treat each other and have a good gym culture, but also know that, we have 5 people in one position and we're only taking 2 of them. And how we deal with that, that's hard to do. I struggled with that when I was a player. The feedback has been great. I think they're enjoying their experience. I think we're getting in the gym and we're competing. We're playing a lot of 6s. I think that's the best way to learn when you got, good talent in the gym with some depth. We're obviously getting some structure where I think we need structure, and then we're competing a lot. And so I think the girls are enjoying that. We're trying to be as transparent as we can possibly be. I don't think there's any scenario where transparency is 100%, but we're trying to tell them, like, hey, here's how we're making decisions, and we'll have those conversations when we get to them.
Do you have an ideal style that you want USA Volleyball to play with, or is that something that varies just based on who's in the gym and their particular strengths?
Those are trade secrets. I can't tell you.
Well, Karch was always very transparent, right? About, like, I want to play super fast and, not asking to create a competitive disadvantage, but, like, is there a way that you want this program to play to form an identity around USA Volleyball?
Yeah, look, we feel like we need to attack from the middle of the court as much as possible. I think when you look at numbers and percentages, that just is the best efficient way to do it. We're developing systems with the Bick that allow us to do that probably faster than you're going to be used to seeing. We're trying to play some out-of-system stuff that's inside, not historically outside, like, maybe you've seen in the women's game a lot more. So we're creating some small system stuff like that. I wouldn't say, like, we're going to be the fastest team in the world. We're going to run things with tempo. We're going to do things to stress defenses out. But, the biggest thing is probably in the middle of the court. How much can we attack out of the middle of the court, I think, is really important. So we're trying to develop systems that allow us to do that. And we're training that a lot. And then defensively, look, I think you need to have the ability – you need to have a base foundation of being in some kind of bunch read and being able to see the game and react and do that at a high level. But then also the variability of having – some modifications in there to deal with matchup issues on the other side. So, I don't think there's not going to be any revelation. I think people are going to watch us run the Bick and go, whoa, what are they doing? And how are they doing that? And to be honest with you, I didn't know we'd be able to do the things I wanted to do on day one. But I walked out of that first practice thinking, yeah, we can do that. And it's a really fun way to play.
Sure. Hey, you kind of built your reputation as being a defensive coach at Texas too. Jeff and I have got to see Alexi Rodriguez play for the last 4 years at Nebraska up close, and she's invited to the roster for this. I mean, what have you seen from her both across the net as you prepared to play here over the last 4 years, and what do you like that she brings to the team pool now part of the national team?
Yeah, she's really good. I think when you watch her play, she is very calm. She makes it look really simple and easy, and she touches the ball really well. She makes great plays and puts the ball where she wants to put it. I think she's doing really nice things. She's been in the gym with us for pretty much all 3 weeks. I think she was one of the first players to arrive. She's been great. she hasn't been, sometimes some players come in here, and I don't think really there's been anyone out of our group of 23 that gets a little rattled. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm on the national team. We're in here training with the national team. They all seem like they own it. That was one of my messages early on with them, was like, hey, this is your team. Don't wait for it to feel comfortable. You got to come in and own this. And you're here for a reason. I didn't just haphazardly go out and invite people to come in here. You earned the right to be in here and go, from day one, own it and get after it. And she's been that to a T. She's been great. But she's one of a handful of liberos that we have that are all very similar, that touch the ball real well, make it look pretty easy, can make some spectacular plays when they need to make a spectacular play. That's going to be a tough position for us to figure out just because of the depth.
Erik, want to ask you a little bit of a bigger picture question just about volleyball in the U.S. right now. And in most countries, the sort of the national team program, the senior national team program is are the stars of the show. They're the highest level, most prominent athletes in the sport. We have seen these tremendous viewership numbers on TV and attendance numbers around college athletes now. I mean, what are the biggest challenges, or maybe another way to put it is what are the biggest opportunities to grow that USA Volleyball has right now, knowing that it sort of feels like volleyball has a moment where they can capture the public attention all the way leading up to a home Olympics in 2028?
Yeah, it sounds like a great question for a guy named John Speraw.
You got his number? We'd love to talk to him.
I do. I can text it to you. Yeah, look, I agree with you. I've been around this thing for a long time now. You said half my life, and it's more like 2/3 or 3/4. Unfortunately, I'm getting old. I feel like this time, and look, pro leagues have come and gone in my 30-some years with doing this, 35 years doing this or being around it. This is the first time where I feel like there's a real footing or foundation or like a surge behind it, really. I don't think it's going anywhere. So, it's interesting. USA Volleyball, I think, is in a pretty good spot. They've obviously got to shore some stuff up. And for us, the senior teams, I just think it's a little different in our country with our pro sports, the way that they're, the pro sports tend to have the highlight on them, and then national teams are around and you see glimpses of them every once in a while. And then, the Olympics come and they're the thing for the next, those 2 weeks, and then it tends to fade away. And so I know in talking to John, he's real adamant about trying to shore up that for USA Volleyball at all levels, junior, through kind of the transitionary period into the senior national team and high performance, all that stuff. But that question is probably a little over my head about how you monetize that, how you continue to grow it, how I think the big part of USA Volleyball is to get in a space where we are sharing in some of that growth and profits, but also we're just supporting the whole thing, at the end of the day, that is great. Not just a great experience for our Olympians, but great experience for everyone in our country that has volleyball around them. I mean, me included, I would have never thought when I started playing this that I would be in it for my lifetime. And it's just, it's provided me, this great career that, like I mentioned before, I feel like I'm kind of fleecing everybody because I don't really have a job. And yeah, my
they are paying you, right? Like they're not asking you to volunteer.
It's not volunteer. But man, I just, and I'm working about 14 hours a day right now, but it still feels pretty good when I go home and when I wake up, I'm like, oh man, we get to go do this again. I'm definitely working, but it just doesn't, I don't know.
Well, not only you got a job with USA Volleyball, but you got the Love Volleyball head coach
job.
How do you balance
like I'm playground for 14 hours?
Yeah.
I'm going to put it that way.
Yeah. How do you go about balancing that? Was that something that they approached you about after you were kind of USA Volleyball, or was that something that was in the works that as another good opportunity that was locally kind of, mentioned the stability of staying in Austin, that Austin's got a team too. How do you see those kind of entities working together?
Yeah, look, there's going to be some learning curve there. Again, I've been talking to Love probably for a couple of years, just not in a very serious way, but just having some conversations here and there. And when all of that came about, there was a lot of discussion about, hey, is this the right thing to be doing? It hasn't been typical for the U.S. National team coaches to do that. A lot more typical around the world. Mm-hmm. Most national team coaches are seasonal and doing, coaching a pro team in that off season. I think there's some more responsibility here in our country that comes along with this job in the off season than maybe those other jobs. So there was a lot of discussion about, is it the right thing to do? And again, it was one of those things where, yeah, there are some negative pieces to it, but man, the positives outweighed the negatives. And again, for me, situationally, the fact that it was in Austin, that Love is maybe organized the way that it is. I don't think that I would be doing it if I was super involved in the roster management for the team. Mm-hmm. That's still a very centrally organized thing from Love. Yeah, it's the fact that it's in Austin, the fact that I get to coach more, all of those things were like, man, it's not a no-brainer, but it is. There's just so many positives about it that it just seemed like the right thing to do, and we'll figure out the other pieces of it.
Yeah, and there's a level of familiarity because you coached a lot of the players that were on that roster too. So
yeah, look, not only just there, but also, I think we have maybe 17 athletes from that league playing in the national team gym. Yeah, and obviously they're not all going to be on my team, but I think there's a different level of familiarity as well as ability to kind of watch how they're growing and improving when you're competing against them versus just being an outside entity watching. So, obviously there'll be some connection with the athletes that are in our gym, but the fact that we're competing against those guys every week and kind of watching them go through the season and scouting and doing all those things, I think is also a huge positive.
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, sounds like you got your plate full. So, So thanks for making time for us, Erik. We appreciate your time. I mean, looking ahead, USA Volleyball opens Volleyball Nations League in Rio de Janeiro. The defending gold medalists, Italy on June 4th. They'll also play Brazil, the Czech Republic, South Korea. So it's going to be a fun summer for you. So we appreciate you taking some time out to preview that and talk about your new job.
Yeah. Well, we'll be in Arlington too.
Yes.
The week of just after July 4th, I think our first match is the 9th. We play Thailand. So if you can get out there, get out there.
Yeah. Sounds like a great way to support the United States. Watch some great volleyball this summer as well, too. So excellent. Thanks for joining us, Erik, on Volleyball State.
Thanks, Erik.
Appreciate you guys for having me. Yeah, thank you.
And thanks again to Erik Sullivan for spending so much time with us and being so generous. We move into rotation 2. Lincoln, let's just look back and talk about some of the things that Erik dropped with us in a wide-ranging conversation. One of the things that I thought was interesting, and I had forgotten this, and I was kicking myself when he mentioned it for not remembering this, but he gets to come into a really nice situation with this program where he's not under pressure to qualify. Yeah. And there have been times, even though the U.S. has had a lot of success, they've gone silver, gold, bronze, I think, in the last 3 Olympics. Like, it's not a slam dunk for them to qualify out of NORCECA because, Canada's a threat now. Dominican Republic's always a threat. And it's not like the World Cup where you get, I don't even know how many teams make the World Cup now. Is it 42 or 48? Like, everyone and their brother-in-law gets invited to the World Cup. The Olympics is still a pretty select tournament where there's a certain number of European slots and a certain number of North American and Caribbean slots. So the U.S. as the host country in 2028 doesn't have to play for the next couple of years under the pressure of qualification, which I think gives him a lot of freedom this summer when they're going to play a lot of tournaments. They're going to play, I think, 3 senior team tournaments this summer, and he gets to mix and match this lineup that is going to have a lot of new faces on it after you have some long time Olympians retiring, like Jordan Larson and Kelsey Robinson Cook, and Annie Drews, I think, is done, and maybe a couple other players as well. But he gets to come in with a little bit of a blank slate.
Yeah, it's kind of an end of a cycle. I mean, you look at some of the national teams do like to change coaches after following the Olympics too. And you saw Karch Kiraly hand off the baton to him because he's going to the men's side. But yeah, and to qualify, I mean, there's only 12 teams that make the Olympics to not have to deal with that pressure. I mean, you kind of talked about that too, about how they went on the men's side, they went so long without having to deal with that pressure just because of hosting and gold medals and things like that, that when you do have to qualify, it really cranks up the pressure. And so for someone that, I mean, he even admitted he's still learning the coaching reps. I mean, getting a lot of coaching reps as a head coach. He doesn't have a lot of experience with that. He's been a very key part of Texas's success in the college ranks too. But when you move that one seat over, it's a whole different world of pressure and expectations that you have and responsibilities that you have to deal with too. So it's good that he can kind of ease into it and not have that looming weight of qualifying hanging over him.
Like, people who coach national teams, and this goes for volleyball, this goes for soccer, USA basketball, I'm sure. Like, it's a huge microscope, and you never make everyone happy unless you come home with a gold medal for whatever competition you're playing in, because you have such a big roster pool that you could select from. Everyone's always has that under a microscope. Like, the 30-player roster or 30-player pool for the summer tournaments has been released. And, on the parts of the internet where people really pay attention to volleyball, there are a lot of people questioning maybe like the number of his former players at Texas that are on that roster. And, he's in a tough spot. Like, that's an intense microscope to come into and have to pick your roster and then, put it out there on the court to be evaluated against everyone else. Like, I think there's a reason why this job has not always been easy to fill. And I credit him. I guess I had a lot of admiration when we asked him, do you feel I don't know if insecure is the right word, but this is a big job for somebody who's never been a head coach before. And this certainly turned heads and raised eyebrows when his hiring was announced. Erik Sullivan, somebody who has not led a college program. He's not been a pro head coach. He's been an assistant with the men's national team in some capacities, but like, it's a big thing to step into the head coaching chair. And I think it's going to be really fascinating to see kind of what it looks like at the end of this summer.
Yeah, because there's also a lot of additional responsibilities, like talking to podcasts and media outlets who are also vying for your time as you're trying to build a program and do that too. So it is interesting. I mean, I think you don't know what the process was, that where he was on the list of people that they interviewed and offered the job to or talked to during the process, but he's the one leading the program now, and it's going to be interesting. Well, the other thing I want to move on to the next kind of topic here, reacting. From what I recall the conversation, he didn't really seem to narrow down like this is how we're going to play. He seemed very flexible about playing style. What was your kind of takeaway from that topic?
Well, I think he didn't have as defined an identity, and I don't mean this as a criticism, but he was not ready to talk about a defined identity to the extent that like Karch Karai would always talk about, we want to go USA fast, and his players would talk about that. They wanted to set the fastest offense in the world. I did think it was interesting that he talked about, hey, we've got some really talented middles, and we just need to do better to run our offense through the middle, which means you've got to be really good at passing. And at the international level, that means that your outside hitters are usually really strong at ball control. And, I think the outsides on the roster this summer have a little bit to prove in that area, right? Because like Jordan Larson and Kelsey Robinson-Cook were two of the best passing outsides in the world during their international careers, and they're not on the team anymore. So now you got to bring in some new players that can pass well enough to stay in system against the best teams in the world. And I don't have the roster in front of me to tell you who all those middles are. But, even a player like Chiako Bagu, the former Texas star who's been on the Olympic team in the past, that's probably got to be music to her ears. And also he talked about run the Bick, which if you're not super familiar with volleyball, it means setting a back row quick out of the back row. He's got the setter for it if Jordan Poulter remains the starting setter for Team USA. Because even going back to her college days at Illinois, she was great at running back row attacks. And in the international play, you can set that fast. You can set your back row on the right fast with Catherine Plummer if she's going to be your opposite. So, I think you're seeing more in like the athleticism of the women's game is just going up, up, and up. And so you're seeing more quick attacks, more back row attacks, and just a little more creativity on offenses that are not solely just focused on setting the pins in the front row.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the process. He wants to get to know the players too. And I think that sometimes national team coaches get in trouble because they have a set system that they're going to adhere the best players that they have available to them into that system too. Whereas I think he seems maybe more flexible, figuring out what the strengths are of this next cycle of players, to what they can bring and what their strengths are. And a lot of that depends on who's playing setter, I think, too. I mean, the United States has been very blessed to have some really elite level setters. We'll see what, I mean, like Jordan Polto, you mentioned, she'll be back. Jenna Gray's coming up. She's on the summer roster this summer. Ella Powell, and then Sage Kahana
Torres.
Torres, thank you. Yes, Torres. Who
everyone just called her SKT. That's fine.
Yes, SKT. She knows him from Texas. She played some of her career at Texas as well too. So,
well, and he has got some resources just within his staff and USA Volleyball that can give him some insight. You know, he's pretty tight with Karch Karai, who's just down the hall, so to speak, coaching the men's team now. He's coached the women for the last 2 Olympic cycles. One of his assistants on this team is Taiba Hanif Park, who has been part of the national team program before, is a pro coach in, I forget if she's a Love coach or
no, she's San Diego. Mojo is where she was
from the PBF. And so she has a knowledge of these players. And so I think, there's some good resources within USA Volleyball. He's not just sitting there making a list from scratch. But, it's a busy summer, as we talked about with him for the U.S., that he'll get plenty of chances to see these players on the court and mix and match some partnerships. It starts with the Volleyball Nations League, which is going to take them all over the world. Part of that weekend is going to be in Arlington, Texas. So if you're down in Texas, you're going to make a trip down there, you can see the U.S. play there. The World Championships are going to be in Thailand a little bit later this summer. And that's kind of the second biggest tournament in the world behind the Olympics. So, that's a medal or place the U.S. wants to medal. The Pan Am Cup is going to be, I think, in late September? Excuse me. I'm looking at here. No, wait, sorry. It's in August. And that's going to be the under 23 team. So that's going to be current college players and some recent graduates are going to be in that team. We'll talk about that in a little bit more. And then the final sort of senior league tournament of the fall is going to be the NORCECA Final Six, which is going to be, I believe, the senior national team.
Yes, yeah. He said that he'll be helping out with that one too. So I think that's kind of from VNL to the Final Six. That he's going to have a bigger. And usually, I mean, in past he's handed that off to assistant coaches or people within the system to lead that Final Six. I mean, it's a good tournament. We saw that was the one. That was the one that Merritt Beeson played in a couple of years ago, and I'm trying to remember if that was one that Bergen Riley played in when she was a high school senior.
When they like called her up when she was in high school in South Dakota and said, "Hey, we need another setter."
I think that was the Final Six that she played in. It may not have been. I know it was some team or some national team tournament that she played in. So, but I think that's the good thing, that he's going to get lots of reps, lots of chances to see some of people in the pool of senior national team players to play and get that. And also, again, like we mentioned, get some head coaching reps. I think that's the most important thing for him to do this summer, is get to know the personnel and also get to know how he operates as a head coach, because that's different than how you operate as an assistant coach at times, because you got to worry about more than just your whether you're the defensive coordinator or if you're in charge of a position group. You got to be in charge of everything.
Yeah, and maybe he'll follow through on his promise to hook us up with John Speraw. I think we might have reached out to John or USA Volleyball right when he was named president and CEO, but that'd be another great guest to get on, and we could ask all sorts of USA Volleyball questions.
Yes, we can ask him about TV contracts and why we enjoy Texas and Shreveport and places like that. So we got questions. We'll send them out there.
Absolutely. All right. Hey, you want to move on to Rotation 3 and a little more Nebraska-centric news?
Yes. So Rotation 3, Nebraska. I don't know if it was a big surprise. There have been I think we had hinted at it previous shows too, that Nebraska was looking at this possibly. But finally, as official, last week, Nebraska announced the addition of Virginia Adriano, who is a 6'5" opposite who played for Bergamo in Serie A1 this past year. So just really working on my poor Italian pronunciations there. So
yeah, Serie A is the top. Well, Serie A1 is the top league in the Italian league. So
I would say it's the top league in the world too.
Right. Exactly. Most people, I think, now would tell you that, this is where the same league that Canigano plays in. What's the other big team
Vero?
that, yeah, exactly. Vero Volley, which is one of the
Yep.
best teams in the world. And these are always teams that are fighting for the European Club Championship and have some true international stars on it. So I've been trying to make like an NBA analogy for this. This is like somebody who played in the G League, that was a big star in the G League, but then that got called up and was getting like 9th or 10th man roster time with, I
The
don't
Orlando
know,
Magic.
pick your mid-tier NBA team,
Magic.
like someone who can seriously play. And then that person, after that, going back down and playing for like Duke for a season. That's sort of like what this is like. It sets up a really interesting. Well, let's talk about what we know about Virginia Adriano first. She averaged 2.4 kills a set with a 385 hitting percentage in some limited time with the top division with Bergamo. She really stood out in the second division, so like the second tier of the Italian league. She hit 384 there and was a real star. And she's young, obviously, because she's in college. She's 21 years old or about to turn 21. And we believe she's going to have 3 seasons of eligibility. And Lincoln, I know you've been able to dig up some highlights of her from the Italian league. And then she's really played a big role on the Italian junior national team. So she's played in some like under 21 European World Championships. And, this is a real player that Nebraska's added.
Yeah, I just found them some volleyball sickos. They're the ones who JW Volley, I think, has put them together. They dig through the archives. I just like, oh yeah, put her name into YouTube. Here's what we got. So, but yeah, what I saw is she's a big physical player. I mean, she's 6'5", and I mean, from what I can tell on video, well put together, very physical player, hits with power. She also a pretty decent serve from what I saw too, but she's what you want from an international opposite too. I mean, a lot of times in international ball, the opposite is the leading attacker too. I mean, they're the ones who are the terminators. We talked about the U.S. national team. The outside hitters are a lot more better passing, better. I mean, they can attack too, but they're better with ball control. Whereas the opposite, they're attacking in all 6 rotations and expected to put the ball down too. And I mean, she's young, but you see glimpses of why she's put in that position because she has the potential to be really good there.
Well, and if she spent any time in the Italy gym, she's got to watch potentially the best player in the world. Italy's opposite is Paola Eganu, who is the star of the Olympics last year and helped Italy win the gold medal, who isn't much older than her. I want to say Eganu's in her mid to late 20s. So like that Italy opposite room's pretty stacked right now. And she joins a pretty stacked position group at Nebraska because you're going to have Ryan Hunter, who's going to be a true freshman this fall. And you've got Ali Czech, the transfer from Baylor, who's going to arrive this summer. And so all 3 of these options, none of them have taken an official swing in a Nebraska uniform yet. But it's a room that's maybe now with Adriano's addition become the most intriguing position group at Nebraska. I mean, that's how I feel. I don't know. Yeah. Do you feel that way?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's the most. I mean, I think people were head over heels over Ryan Hunter, which she put on a show in her first spring exhibition match in Kansas. Came a little bit down against South Dakota State too, but again, the potential is there too. But I mean, I got a chance to talk to Jalen Reyes last week after the announcement came out, just to kind of learn the backstory with the recruitment. And it really kind of came from last year. They had Merritt Beeson was All-American as a junior, but she was the only person that was an opposite hitter on Nebraska's roster last year too. And she struggled a bit at times too. And Nebraska, I mean, I know they trained Skylar Pierce there too, but they also wanted to preserve her year of eligibility. And I think they really just wanted to make sure that they had option 2. Ryan Hunter is coming off a knee injury too. So they hit the portal and they started this kind of pursuit or really back in December last year. Jalen Reyes, for as good of a recruiter as he is, didn't have a whole lot of European contacts. So he really kind of worked people that he didn't know, developed a lot of contacts, and landed on Virginia from his contacts, and then started that conversation with her in late January. So even before, I mean, this all started under John Cook, because one of the funny things was one of his first conversations with Danny Busboom Kelly was Danny talked to him about, hey, I'm thinking about moving to be in charge of pin hitters. He's like, Okay, that's great. By the way, what do you think of this potential opposite over in Italy too? So one of his first conversations kind of bring her into the kind of groundwork he had laid to learn about this too. And from what I can tell, Nebraska wasn't really recruiting against another school. They were recruiting against the Italian Pro League. Whether or not she would stay there and continue to play. I mean, like we said, the best professional league in the world, or bring her over, get her a chance to play in the collegiate world with one of the premier collegiate programs. So, and she was open to it too. And talking to her, one of her big priorities is education too, because she knows that she can only be a volleyball player for so long. She wants to be in fashion design, which go ahead and make your Italian stereotype there about being a fashion designer. Good for her, but she wants to study that and do
Nebraska's
that right now.
Nebraska's got a really nice clothing and textiles design program.
There you go. Yeah, it's easier to do that as a student athlete, as much as that moniker gets thrown around in the United States, than it is to do that as a professional player in Italy. I mean, she messed around with some online programming, and you can do some online programs. Fashion design is not very probably translatable to an online study course. So she's really interested in the academic side of things too. I think that was kind of what ultimately made her comfortable making this jump halfway across the world, where she knows, I mean, she's met Jalen once in person, talked to him probably a dozen of times or so. She's really taken.
She hasn't been here, right? She hasn't visited.
No, in fact, we're recording this on Wednesday. She told me that Tuesday she was down at the U.S. consulate down in Florence, got approved for her visa, and is set to come to the United States here in a couple of weeks. So she has not been to the United States, but is excited about the opportunity and is looking forward to it.
We've talked a little bit on social media about Nebraska does not really have a long history with international players. Some programs do. Usually if a program has an assistant coach on their staff from another country, Georgia Tech always sticks out to me, and they will have but a lot of Brazilians on their team. Miami usually has an international flavor. And then so a lot of those smaller East Coast schools that get sent to Lincoln for round one of the NCAA tournament always seems like they have a couple of international players. Nebraska, I think we counted up, maybe only had 7 or 8 international players.
Depending on whether you want to count Gracely Sapera, who's from Puerto Rico.
Yeah. And Sarah Pavin is from Canada, which culturally isn't super, super different than the United States. And her family could get from Ontario to Lincoln without crossing an ocean. One of the things I remember, like John Cook would talk about with international players, and I remember him talking about this maybe specifically about Cece Hall or Shanna Abramovich, is that like every year they could reevaluate whether they wanted to keep going to school here, or in a lot of other countries, there is no tuition. You can just go to a state school for free. So if they feel like they've maxed out their volleyball career and they still want to finish school, there was nothing stopping Cece Hall, who was from Sweden, to go back to Sweden and finish going to school there. That was back in an era where most college players did not have the freedom of movement that they have now. I still think that, it could be an ongoing conversation at the end of each season with a player like Virginia Adriano on if she's got attractive professional offers, how important is the school aspect of it in the moment if a professional team is coming and offering you twice as much money as you're making in the United States. I don't know. So, I don't want to put the cart way before the horse, but like let's see what season 1 of Virginia Adriano looks like first.
And you just saw this on the men's side of things too. Alex Nikolov, who won the National Player of the Year at Long Beach State, led Beach to the national title. He was a freshman and he's one and done too. But I mean, the impression that I got is that we'll see how it goes too, but the education part was just as important, if not more important, than the volleyball side too. In fact, she said this past year, she viewed it as a wasted year in her educational path too, because like I said, she dabbled in some online courses, but really didn't get to study what she wanted to study. So it could be a 3-year commitment. It could be a 1-year deal. We'll see how it goes. But I think, talking to her, she put a big emphasis on learning English, and there's a very natural conversation for me to have. I'm sometimes fluent in English, but She was very good. I mean, it was a good conversation. I had no trouble understanding her, and she's very articulate for someone speaking in their second language. So it was. I mean, I think she'll fit in with this and fit into Nebraska. And I know there's been some communication between some of the players, but it's also going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out at opposite hitter too. So we'll see what that does to team chemistry, just to add another element into the unknown.
Well, if you see a 6'5" Italian young woman walking around East Campus this fall, like make sure you point her toward the dairy store, because we got to get her some of that dairy store ice cream. Let's move on to rotation 4 now. And, often I was jealous of Brent for putting out good stuff. Friend of the show, Brent Wagner, who I'm still used to saying works for the Lincoln Journal-Star, but now there's the combined entity of Journal-Star and the World Herald. This interview has appeared in both places. So, just pick it out.
Probably in the Columbus Telegram too.
Yeah, pick it up wherever you get your local Lee Enterprises publication. Brent did a pretty wide-ranging interview with John Cook, and dropped some really interesting nuggets. I thought were worth discussing and expanding on. And Lincoln, I want to get your take. But one of the most interesting things I thought was Cook sort of laid out Nebraska's NIL pay structure, and not like person by person, here's what they made. But it struck me that Nebraska went into this at a time when I think a lot of volleyball programs were like, I have no idea what to do in this space, and I don't really even want to. Like, Nebraska realized this could be a competitive advantage for them. And so Cook and whoever he worked with to create this, created a real intentional structure on how athletes were going to get paid, with some retention bonus type structures. And if you made an All-American level, and it didn't really seem like it was the model of where they went out and they offered one star player X amount of money. I don't know if they have or they haven't, but it really seemed more like almost like a collectively bargained structure.
Yeah, and I think it's something that you want to, when you recruit highly sought after, highly talented people too, you don't want to have them discussing, I'm getting paid this, or I'm getting paid this, or reading reports about because some agent likes to say amounts too. And Cook really didn't say any amounts in that interview article too, but kind of said, if you're proving your worth on the court and you stick around, you will get paid more. So you get more incentive to stick around long term. And I think it's different. I mean, I think it's set up during NIL, but also, revenue sharing is also very easily folded. And I think Nebraska, we'll see how it shakes out, but Nebraska could be one of the few schools that is dedicating revenue share to the sport of volleyball too. I mean, I would be surprised if more than a dozen maybe are doing that nationwide. There will be others besides Nebraska, but there won't be very many, because for most schools, for every other school, volleyball is an expense, and Nebraska is one of the few that makes money off it too. So that was very interesting as well too.
My last thought on it is, it's good to have a structure in place. I don't think Nebraska, though, has been really tested yet, and they will by someone who's buys into this structure right away, but then maybe has a really good year, or is hearing other schools in her ear about transferring. And then that player goes now to Danny Busboom Kelly and says, hey, other school is offering me X amount of dollars, which is more than I'm making here. Can you or will you match that? Just like any other workplace.
Ever do, because that's tampering, right? No school tampers.
Yeah,
right?
That never happens. So, say, just to use this as a total hypothetical, but we had the recent case of Kennedy Martin, who entered the transfer portal from Florida and is now ended up at Penn State. You have a lot of work to do as a coach to figure out, not only would a player like this, if I chose to pursue them, would they fit on the court? Is this a weapon that can make my team better? But also, do I go in and I offer a high level player a competitive salary to try to get them? And what does that do to everyone else on my locker room? So everyone in the college sports landscape kind of gets thrust into the real world now, where there's salary jealousy and there's resentments that might go along with that you're not used to handling, because you've never been in this situation before as a 19-year-old volleyball player. So that day will come eventually for Nebraska, if not this year, some year.
Yeah, and I know Nebraska the past couple of years too, they have a rule that they don't talk about NIL deals in the Devaney Center too. They talked about him when the media asked about him, but it's not something that they're bringing up in the locker room or things like that. It's kind of a safe zone to. If they need to take care of that, it needs to happen outside Devaney Center. But revenue sharing changes that all, and we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see how that goes.
You can try, and you can really make that part of your team culture. But like the players will know.
They know.
They will know, and they will figure it out very quickly. And then you see how strong your team chemistry and your structure really is.
For sure. Let's move on to the next topic too. Yeah, one of the things. I mean, John Cook's been at Nebraska. Was at Nebraska for 25 years too, and you wondered if anybody came to approach him or poach him and maybe throw bags of money, come save our program. No one ever did, but the one he did mention was that he was approached by both men and women national teams to do that. Were you surprised that? I don't know. Were you surprised that he didn't entertain that more? Or we never heard about that till now.
Yeah.
This may be one of the things that you said would have been nice to know 8 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, does it surprise me? No. Cook has ties to USA Volleyball. He was an assistant on the men's team in, I want to say, the 1992 Olympics.
Yep.
The Barcelona games.
Barcelona.
And so like he was known to USA Volleyball. And like my working theory is USA Volleyball has talked to a lot of current successful college coaches and just has not been able to land that plane for one reason or another. It's hard on the women's side because the women's college season overlaps a little bit with international tournaments. Like you basically have to do like Hugh McCutcheon did at Minnesota and take a year off from coaching your college team. It's easier on the men's side, right? We just saw John Speraw coach the men's Olympic team for 2 cycles while also being the head coach of the UCLA men's team. And that's because the men's college season basically runs from like January to early May. And then you can pick up your national team stuff in the summer. Well, you can't really do that if you are coaching a women's college team. So I bet they went to a number of college coaches over the years and it offered them that job or tried to at least engage them in conversation. And it didn't work out for money reasons. And it probably didn't work out for timing reasons. So like, if I was the head of USA Volleyball, I definitely would have called up John Cook and said, do you want to come coach the Olympic team?
Sure. We saw this kind of locally the last couple of years in the Big Ten. Aaron Virtue was named head coach at Michigan, and then she missed several weeks during September of her first going to World Championships too, and then was also gone this past summer, which she was an assistant coach for the Olympics as well too. I mean, so yeah, you do miss a lot of that time development, and also some of those World Championships go into the fall and the start of the college volleyball season. So I wasn't surprised it didn't do that, but you wonder how serious those discussions were, or just kind of, hey, would you ever consider this? Or if they actually talked financials, or like, just here's a wild idea. What do you think of this?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm also not surprised that he never really seriously considered a different college program. You know, the story is famous at this point of like Tom Osborne being approached by Colorado in the late 70s when his Nebraska teams were, you know, maybe not meeting the expectations of the most diehard of fans, even though they were really good seasons by almost anyone's metric. But like if you're school X, like the number of schools who could probably make a realistic run at John Cook are already really small. And then kind of knowing how Nebraska was taking care of him later in his career, like Cook left Wisconsin in part because Nebraska was going to pay him more. And he was already kind of at the top of the market. So like, unless you were looking at like a Texas or gosh, I don't even know who else like has the resources to dedicate to volleyball in this way.
We don't know how much Penn State pays her because they have.
It doesn't shock me that he didn't. That he seemed like pretty happy in Lincoln for quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell you that's true. The other thing that he kind of talked about too was he talked a lot about past players. One of those great. You remember this person?
We did some remembering some dudes in this interview.
But one of them was he talked about the best development story too. Or he named the Christina Hotelling, who was the National Player of the Year in 2007. Was that right? It was a year after.
It was 6 or 7. One was Pavin, one was Hotelling.
A year after they won the title.
Oh, okay. Or maybe
she missed 6 with an injury. She didn't play on.
You know who would know the answer to this question? Past us when we did the John Cook all-time player draft. Because we talked a lot about Christina Hotelling, and if I dug through our show notes, I could find it. But like the point stands, Christina Hotelling was the National Player of the Year one of those years. 07, I think.
07.
Yeah.
No, it was 05. It was 05.
Oh man, yeah, because she was National Player of the Year, and then she had to take the next year off because of injury. What I remember about Christina telling just from our player draft was that she was the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year as well as an outside hitter. She was a really good passer. I think what John said, she came to school as a middle out of very small Cambridge, Nebraska, and from where she started her career to where she ended it was Cook's favorite development story. And one of the other players in there, I know, Lincoln, you drafted her for your Cook team draft, was Melissa Elmer, who, you know, I love. John Cook is normally unfiltered, and now that he's retired, he just like says whatever. Basically said that Melissa Elmer couldn't jump when she got to school, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, why'd recruit this player?" And then she went on to be like the most successful statistical blocking middle that Nebraska ever had.
Yeah, because I think I remember she also won several like weightlifter of the years too. I mean, there's a testament to the power of or wonders of Nebraska power and their weightlifting program too. So, yeah, those two were great stories. The other thing that I thought was maybe, I mean, talking about the progress they made, but he said that one of the best setter, I thought, which there's a lot. Nebraska's had some great setters and won National Player of the Year, All Americans. But he said Rachel Holloway, who was a 2-year, she was here 2 years and then
3 because she redshirted her first year. But when I read, and that was like, it was a throwaway line in the quote about Christina hoteling. And when I read that, you know what I did? I threw my arms up and I go, I knew it. I knew it. And I think funnily enough, neither you or me drafted Rachel Holloway as our setter on our Cook team, because I think you took Gracia Lee and I took Kelly Hunter. But like Rachel Holloway, I would love to have her on for just like 45 minutes, and maybe we could reach out and make that happen. Rachel Holloway is the biggest what if in Nebraska volleyball history. And like, I won't get into the whole thing because I don't know the whole thing, but just on the court, she redshirted in 2005 when Nebraska ran a 6-2. She started as a redshirt freshman as setter in 2006 and won the national title. And then as a sophomore in 2007, she set like the best team to not make the Final Four in Nebraska volleyball history and was outstanding. And then left school and stopped playing volleyball. And Cook identified her as like, I forget what he said, the best or the most talented setter I've ever coached. And John is very careful, as I think you probably have to be when you're currently coaching. He has never said like, this is the best player, this is my favorite player. You know, he was very equal among all of his players and diplomatic. But to come out and say like Rachel Holloway is the best setter I ever coached, I was like, aha, I knew it.
Yeah, Rachel Holloway, who was probably the best setter I ever coached. That's the line.
Well, we know when we talked with Sarah Pavin a couple of weeks ago, she was like, "Oh yeah, I was texting with Rachel Holloway. Like, we gotta get a phone number or something."
She still pays attention to Nebraska volleyball too. So quickly, let's talk about it.
I'm sorry. Look, one more thing on this. Like,
go ahead.
Of course, like I yelled, I knew it when I saw that, but I was happy to hear him say that, because one could speculate on like how Rachel Holloway like views the program that she left after 2 years. And I really hope that wasn't the first time that he said that about her or to her. I hope that she heard that from him sometime, you know, in the past, because like that's a heck of a compliment. And like, I can only imagine how that would make someone feel to hear that from their former coach. So I hope she knows that he thinks that way.
Yeah, because like we said, there's a long list of very accomplished setters. I mean, Gracia Lee Sapero was National Player of the Year too. Kelly Hunter led him to 2 titles. I mean, Lauren Cook she was National Freshman of the Year at UCLA and then came here, ran a great program. Bergen Riley's 2-time All-American her first 2 years at Nebraska too. And I mean, there's a whole bunch more. I mean, Maggie Griffin, some other players too. So, but the last thing I would talk about here too. I mean, John talked about his favorite road trips and mentioned that Illinois. That to me came as a surprise too, because I mean, I've never been to Illinois. Their gym is just kind of too far and inaccessible that it doesn't make a lot of sense to go on a road trip there. So I was
surprised he said it, because I've heard him crap on Illinois before. Just from like, you know, Huff Hall it's an older facility. It's not like one of these newer volleyball centric facilities like Indiana or Ohio State has. I don't think it has air conditioning. And so one thing they would always talk about is they would run these giant box fans in the arena to move some air around, and it affected the serving. So
Mhm.
like you could go in and do your float serve, and the fan would actually affect how the ball moved. And then the Illinois student section, I think he ruefully really enjoyed, because Nebraska for the longest time didn't have a difference making student section like maybe Ohio State or A&M or Illinois does. So he really liked the Spike Squad, kind of the home court advantage that they brought. Plus, they rarely lost there. And so I feel like Nebraska rarely lost at Illinois. And I think it's easier to say nice things about places you usually win.
Yeah. Even though they like to call Alexi Rodriguez or any other Illinois-based player a traitor whenever they would go back to serve. That was their go-to chant for that. So, yeah, I found that a little bit surprising as well too. He also kind of picked out some of his top teams for this past year too. A lot of familiar faces on that list too. He called Texas is loaded. He said he wasn't unsure. He was uncertain about Wisconsin because they got a lot of new parts there. But he called Minnesota and also UCLA as his sleeper teams.
Yeah,
you agree with that
Minnesota.
assessment?
I honestly don't know as much about UCLA. I know they just picked up a middle blocker from Texas transfer. Their setter, I think, is going to be new, and they've got a transfer setter from I want to say Long Beach is going to play for UCLA this year. But Minnesota, after he said that, I did a little bit more looking into. Minnesota could be really good. I think Keegan Cook is a really good coach. And then they added Lourdes Myers from middle blocker from Purdue to Minnesota. Julia Hansen, who put up some big numbers last year for them, is back. And then a name familiar to anyone who followed Big Ten volleyball over the last 10 years, coming in at setter, it could be Stella Swenson, who is the younger sister of Samantha Seliger Swenson, who was a really, really good setter from Minnesota a couple years ago. Well, now her younger sister might end up being the setter for Minnesota. So a lot of Big Ten teams like to keep it in the family, it seems like, at the setter position. And Minnesota is going to roll out there. And I think they finished 5th or 6th in the Big Ten last year and have a chance to stay in that top tier again.
Yeah. I think Minnesota I caught a lot of flack for from their perception, not appreciating the genius that was Julia Hansen and putting lower in my realistic all Big Ten team. So I thought she was definitely a top 8 outside hitter in the conference too. And they thought she was a top 2 or 3 hitter. I'm like, that's glad. But yeah, I think, UCLA, they look pretty good too. They like you said, they got Zanya Meyer, who's a transfer from Long Beach State. Maggie Lee, who's a transfer from Cal. I think she's a really dynamic outside hitter. So I'm excited about her. And then they kind of rebuilt their middles. You mentioned Mariana Singletary from Texas, and then PK Kong from Louisville is out there too. So they've really, and then also Schumacher from Wisconsin just announced her transfer there at Libero as well too. So they've really rebuilt that. So Alfie Reft
is going to have to, doing some team mixers and trust falls to make sure everyone gets to know each other out there.
So yeah, I think so. Other teams mentioned Texas are loaded. He says he wasn't quite sold on Wisconsin and Pitt. Says they got good players, but see how the pieces fit together. He was also mentioned Kentucky should be good too. So it was kind of. I agree with his assessment too. I'm starting to do some of my preview work for the 2025 season and doing some team capsules, and I think that I would agree with a lot of his assessments there.
All right. I know we got to keep this moving. Let's go to rotation 5 and talk a little bit more about some news that came out this week about, it's a mouthful every time we say it. So let's do it on first reference, the John Cook Arena at the Bob Devaney Sports Center. And maybe we can just talk about the Devaney Center from here on. But they're renovating the Devaney Center for the 2026 season, not this fall, but next season. They're going to go up to 10,000 seats, which probably adds just a little over 1,000 additional seats from
just over
1,000 now.
Yeah, they've gotten some crowds of 9,000, including the standing room only. I think maybe just once they've eclipsed 9,000, but they've exceeded 9,000, including those people up on the upper top edge standing for the matches.
Yeah, and if you are a Nebraska sports ticket holder, you got an email this week that talked about how this was going to get reseated. So the reseating starts next year, right? It doesn't start this year.
Correct. They get noticed that this year that their donation amounts went up So
Hmm.
before the reseat, their Nebraska athletic department is requesting more money from the fans because they have such a high retention rate, like 98% retention rate, and
Yeah.
just the turnover for tickets. There's a long waiting list that people got off of. Was it last year? They had some seats to the ends,
Hmm.
both kind of east-west end lines, but there's still a lot of
Hmm.
demand for those tickets, so they are increasing the donation amounts as well.
Yeah, so a lot of people, I guess maybe to look at this in a big picture way, if you're like, oh my gosh, you need to donate money to get volleyball tickets because a lot of places you don't need to pay to go to volleyball matches. But Nebraska has a number of people who have been season ticket holders for a long time, even going back to the Coliseum days, and that's one of the reasons they wanted to move to the Devaney Center because it was it doubled the seating essentially, maybe more than doubled it. And let in more people interested in season tickets. But those people didn't necessarily have to pay a donation or much of a donation to the athletic department to be able to buy season tickets. Well, they have seen what the market is for this now, and they've got a waiting list, and tickets are somewhat hard to get. So what do you do when your supply is limited? You raise prices, and so Nebraska is going to charge people more for the right to do that. And then you donate money to the athletic department, you get a corresponding amount of points, of donor points from the Husker Athletic Fund. And then starting in 2026, like, it does not matter where your season tickets are right now or where they historically have been. They're going to play Yahtzee with it, and everything's up for grabs. And the more donations you make, or the more points you have, that will determine, just like in football. And this is coming to Nebraska football too, as well. Like, don't be surprised when that happens.
Once they finish their South Stadium
the people who donate more money will get the more desirable seats.
Yeah, because there, like you said, there's not a lot of turnover too. I can't remember if it was Dan or somebody where I heard that somebody donated 5 figures to the volleyball program, and that still wasn't enough to get season tickets this past year when there's minimal turnover in those season ticket holders. Almost everyone renews, which is. I mean, you pay for them, you make a donation, which again, this is why Nebraska is volleyball is a profitable sport, because they do have all those add-ins and kind of that influx of cash, rather than just like, what was it? Oh, SMU, for the first time ever, they charged for tickets when Nebraska came down there last year, but Nebraska charges tickets, and you got to make a donation to get in the building.
Yeah, we'll do a little digging, maybe sometime this fall or a future show about, like, what's the minimum level of donation that would get you, like, the highest nosebleed seats. If it was, $1,000 or more, it wouldn't surprise me. I don't know what it is. I just totally made that up. But yeah, if you want to get, like, at the very top level at the Devaney Center, what is your donation expected? We'll do some digging.
Yes. Let's move on to our last rotation, just kind of an odds and ends. Really, we talked about this a little bit earlier too, but the under-23 roster was announced for the Pan Am Cup. This will happen in July and August. They released a list of, 18, 20 players that made the initial train. How they all do is they always invite more players to the training program. They practice for a week or two, and then narrow it down to the final roster of 12 people. But this was like kind of an interesting mix. It's under 23. It's right at that age range where there's some college players in here. There's some professional players in here that graduated from college, completed their college eligibility last year. So it's kind of an interesting age line of what you're going to get. The headline, probably for a lot of our listeners, Merritt Beeson, former opposite at Nebraska, current. She just finished up her first season with the Atlanta Vibe. Was named to the roster as well too. So she's the only Nebraska connected. University of Nebraska connected program.
You got a couple of current and former Creighton players on this roster. Stars, Nora Sis, who recently finished up her career last year for Creighton. Ava Martin, who's got another year of eligibility at Creighton, is on this. And it's just now coming to me, Lincoln. This tournament is going to be in late July, early August. So if Merritt Beeson makes the final roster, she would have to be playing into there. Her coaching career starts this.
Yeah, she's coaching their alma mater high school program too. So
yeah, Gardendale High School in Alabama, and that kind of runs into the start of the high school volleyball season. So I wonder how this is going to affect that. The other position group that I sort of chuckled at, and we talked about before we started taping, the setters that are on this under 23 roster, 2 of them are Avery Carlson, who is just transferred from Texas to SMU, and then Texas's current starter, Ella Swindle. And those two were college teammates last year at Texas. Carlson started her career at Baylor, transferred from Baylor to Texas last year, kind of shared some duties, competed with Swindle, who led them to the title 2 years ago as a freshman. Carlson took the majority of the reps as the starting setter at Texas last year, and then decided for whatever reason to move along to SMU. And so she's going to probably start there this fall, and Ella Swindle resumes the starting spot at Texas. So those two players who shared a locker room for 1 year and sort of shared a starting spot for 1 year are now going to be in the Team USA gym competing to be the starting setter there. So I'd be interested to see kind of like what that group chat looks like.
Yeah. Some other funny reunions. Eva Hudson and Chloe Chicoine, both former teammates at Purdue. They're both now transferred out. Hudson's now at Kentucky. Chicoine's at Louisville. They're two of the outside hitters. Then speaking of former Texas Longhorns, Mariana Singletary, who we mentioned before, going to UCLA now, she's also on their roster too as well. Swindle is on that roster. Her former, and Carlson, her former setters are there too. So yeah, I mean, we'll see how this goes. Usually the United States dominates the Pan Am Cup. And I think this is probably close to the top level of under 23 teams that you're going to find. So I expect the United States to roll through some of these age group tournaments that they usually have in the past.
Absolutely. Last thing I have kind of in our odds and ends section, Nebraska Volleyball has put out this new, I believe it's going to be a documentary series similar to the Chasing 3 that the football team put out last year. And I don't know how many episodes this is going to be, but the first episode of The Epicenter is what it's called. Series came out last week. It's on Nebraska's YouTube channel, and it's all over the Huskers social media right now. But it's a documentary style series that these episodes are usually about 20 minutes long. And this one followed the spring matches, the Kansas spring match and the South Dakota State match out in Ord. And I don't know if this is going to be a thing that goes through the entire season. They get some pretty good access for that. But also, it can be a distraction if every move you make is videotaped and put on the internet. So I'm not sure if this is just something they're going to do a couple of, or if they're going to stretch this out all throughout the season.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching. You hope that. I mean, not just something for the spring, but we'll see what kind of ongoing access and when kind of the frequency is, whether it's once a month or how often. I imagine it takes a lot of production work on the back end to put all this back together and edit through everything that you see happen on the court to create a great storyline.
Certainly more production work than we put into Volleyball State. But hey, you never have a problem with access to us, especially if you subscribe to Volleyball State. It's just $5 a month at patreon.com/I80 Club. You can also get all the other great I80 Club shows. I think our pod's going up tonight right after the regular Wednesday show in the club with I80 Club. Jack and Josh and all the friends do a great job with that. You can subscribe to the show for free and all the other regular ways to get the free show. That's Apple, that's Google, that's Spotify. We're going to pop up on YouTube starting Wednesday night. So check us out on YouTube, on the I80 Club YouTube page. And I don't know if I've gotten some good feedback, Lincoln. I don't know if you have, about Volleyball Late, our post-match show that we are going to be doing after select matches this fall. We demoed it for both Nebraska spring matches, and I had a ton of fun with it. We cram all of this into about 20 minutes. And hopefully when the internet's going to work every single time, so we don't glitch out. But that was a little
shaky in Ord.
That's okay. I thought it was a lot of fun to do, and people seem to like it.
It was a lot of fun just to kind of get all thoughts in your head and word vomit them out in 15-20 minutes is a good time. So if you have any other ideas, comments, suggestions, feel free to reach out to us at volleyballstate@gmail.com. Follow us on all the social medias at Volleyball Pod on Twitter, Blue Sky. You can find Jeff at
Jeff Sheldon. That's right.
And I am on social media at Lincoln_VB. So stay tuned for some good news from the Nebraska volleyball program here shortly, I imagine. But we'll keep putting out content for you, and keep listening and enjoying. And thank you for living in the Volleyball State.